Hey folks, Steve here with a quick little video that is related to a previous video I did several months ago when it was a little more topical. So I'm just showing my screen here for my channel, and a few months back we had a video up on the channel here for in regards to Scramble for Africa. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you may want to watch my previous video. It's quite long. I try to go into depth of the topic and do the whole subject as much justice as I could. So if you're watching this video as sort of just, it showed up in your YouTube feed, if you're more interested in actual board game stuff, you could just close the video, wait for my next Dark Valley video to be uploaded, and have a good time. But if you watch that previous video, or you just kind of want to see my opinion on something related to the hobby, then stick around. This won't be a terribly long video, I hope. So I had the video 50 minutes long, tried to go through all the different things that were sort of tied up in the subject, and just to recap very briefly was GMT had a game on their P500. It was called Scramble for Africa, excuse me, and that game's sort of theme was the Scramble for Africa in the 1800s, but rather than being some sort of like historical war game or like, some sort of like historical simulation, it was basically a Euro. So tile flipping, arbitrary resource Euro stuff. And I don't like Euros personally. I mean, I think they're okay. I'll play them. They're fine. But they wear out their entertainment pretty quickly, and I just prefer war games. And with that game, there was basically some controversy because for the topic that was at hand, it was seen by a lot of folks, especially the target audience that GMT was sort of publishing this game for, which is the Eurogamer community, spoke up and said, hey, this game's kind of, there's some issues with it, and one, how it deals with history, and two, the sensitivity of the topic, and it got some criticism for that. And what ended up happening was that GMT, after receiving a lot of feedback, decided to pull the game from the P500, and the game is basically dropped from GMT's publishing schedule. Now, there are all kinds of different takes on it and what's right or wrong about it. There were folks, unfortunately, who took the opportunity to turn that into a battleground for the culture wars. And you could probably understand what I mean when I say that. And I keep this channel pretty far from politics, or I attempt to. So all I'll say on it is that, the people who want to fight turned it into a fight in a lot of ways. And we had folks from outside the hobby commentating on it. And a lot of folks were stoking the fires a little bit. And in my position, in looking at, you could watch my 50-minute video, but the short sort of takeaway from it for me was the game wasn't very historical, or at least not the historical fidelity that we're used to from GMT games. The people who were very upset about the game being pulled were people who were looking at it from a milsim, conflict simulation, wargamer mindset, and saying, hey, well, you should portray history, but they weren't understanding that, well, this isn't a war game, this isn't a historical simulation game, it's a Euro with randomized terrain tiles and kind of making light of some pretty serious topics that, at least in the wargamer space, we might treat with a little bit more nuance, or at least a little more attention to the actual detail of what's happening in that historical context. So a lot of folks who probably would never have played the game anyway were really concerned about it being canceled. And my position back on it was, well, GMT can do whatever it wants to do, right? I am in favor of the publisher choosing what it decides to publish. And at no point is anyone guaranteed a game being published by them unless there's a contractual agreement signed that guarantees that publishing. But in the absence of that, GMT can dump any game they want for any reason they want. And part of it, I think, was derived from the not wanting to be seen as the company that publishes a game that does a disservice to history, because they're their reputation is staked on producing high-quality historical games. And though they are spreading into the Eurogame market, that's their reputation, right? They make a lot of historical war games, historical board games, and they're a lot of fun. They're usually very high quality, and so they did not want to have this hanging over their head as here's a game that does disservice to history, does disservice to the people who are involved in that conflict, and makes light of what happened there, right? And so, in the aftermath of all of that, and why I'm doing a video on it today, is I wanted to kind of look at this as a post-mortem, right? When all of that happened, it was like a torrent of activity. There was a lot of discussion in the different forums and discussion boards about what was happening and why, and a lot of emotions were brought into it. A lot of people who were, again, wanting to immediately jump to the culture war perspective on what was happening and trying to turn it into a larger and worse off thing than it was. And I just thought, okay, well, it's been 3 or 4 months, and it's worth looking at it now with some time behind us to understand what has happened since then. So, first of all, it didn't seem like the game was picked up by anyone else. There were some discussions of folks talking about, well, can the designer take it to another publisher? It sounded like with GMT, the designer was in agreement with GMT just to drop the game, which is like, hey, I guess that's a bummer for the designer, but hey, they can take it elsewhere, right? But then whoever's going to take that whichever publisher is going to take that game on, is then going to have this hanging over their heads, this whole controversy around the game, and whether or not it does history correctly and does justice to the subject matter, right? I saw a few folks on some forum posts saying, you know what, I'm going to fund my own publishing company to get this game published, because they were just so passionate about it. I don't know why they were so passionate about it. Again, I think it was, emotions were being pulled on. But it didn't sound like anything had come out of that. I've tried to do some searching to find, is it being published somewhere else? I couldn't find anything. So if anyone who's happening to watch this video manages to find a link or has some other news, hey, put it in the comments or send it my way, and I'd be happy to look at what's going on with it. But it looks like the game's it's dead. And to me, it's like I don't feel like we really lost out on anything special from a wargamer perspective, right? If you're watching my video channel, you're doing so because of war games, and it wasn't a war game. You probably care about history. It wasn't very historical, and so I think from where I'm looking at it in the niche hobby, nothing of value was lost in the game being dropped, honestly. But so many people had such a bad reaction to the whole event. I think if we come back now, several months later, we see that it really wasn't a big deal. I mean, it felt like such a big deal at the time because it was so much discussion was happening. It was like the discussion board was like the top of the discussion board for games on Board Game Geek. It was a really big deal, and then it sort of petered out because people kind of realized they didn't really care that much, and then it just went away, right? So just to show something, so there was another YouTuber who did a reaction video to the whole situation as well. And I felt that person created the video in a very reactionary mood. Very like an emotionally driven response that wasn't very rational. I'm not going to bring that person's name up or their channel up because I really don't want to get into like a YouTube battle thing. It's not my intention. I think that person who has the channel does probably a good job otherwise in all of his videos, so my point of what I'm going to show here is just like the level of emotional response that was a little crazy. And unfortunately, I only have post-event stuff to show you. So I took a screenshot or a snip of this person's YouTube channel, and this is what they have a video on their channel that was their sort of video covering the topic at the time. And today, that video was titled, "Is This the End of GMT?" But when that video was first uploaded, it had a different title. The channel hoster, or the channel creator, changed the title of the video after sort of like I guess, realizing how silly the original title was. It wasn't, is this the end of GMT? There was no question mark, and it wasn't a question at all, and it didn't have these two first words. It was just the end of GMT, right? Um, Super clickbaity, super clickbaity. Like, come on! And even the thumbnail, right? GMT games with a slash through it. You know, how dramatic can you be? Um, and this was all part of the emotional response of, oh, this is the end of GMT. Everyone's going to abandon GMT because they did this, and GMT is gonna, it's like slippery slope. They're gonna just get rid of all these historical games. Well, okay, let's you know, if we were being rational before, we would know that's probably not going to happen. And if we're being rational now, we go out to the GMT page, um, and recent game releases. Well, let's see, War Game, Coin Game, War Game, War Game, War Game, War Game. Okay, Space Game, War Game, War Game, War Game. War Game, War Game, War Game. These are reprints, obviously, but sure. Some new P500 game editions. So War Game, War Game, expansion for a War Game, expansion for a War Game. Okay, here's a train game, which, whatever. War Game, some of the other games that, Banish the Snakes, I think, was put on the P500 around the same time, several months ago. But if you were to go and read like all the different updates from GMT, if you were to look at like what are the games that are coming out that are still on the P500 list, like all of the doom and gloomers who were saying, "Oh, this is, gosh, the end of GMT, and they're not going to publish historical games anymore because blah blah blah." Well, okay, it's fine. See, look how fine it is. It's all fine. War games of all kinds. They have a huge production schedule that they're still looking to push out. Nothing has been irreparably damaged by this, and at this point, and this is like, ugh, what have I done, Steve? All of this stuff is probably better left in the past, right? Because no one really cares anymore, right? All the people who were irritated about it, there's like maybe one person out there on the internet who's still just chafing at the fact that the game got canceled and was really upset about it. Most other folks have probably moved on. And again, I'm only bringing it up because I've planned to do this for a while. I think when I made my video, my plan was, okay, in a few months, let's just come back. Let's just come back and see what happened. What else is going on? Like, what has happened since then? Did another publisher pick it up? Was it a big deal? Did GMT fall apart? Did GMT all of a sudden have a bunch of issues? GMT's still around. They've got a lot of games being shipped. They've got a lot of games still being worked on to be released here in the short term. What did we lose? We lost a unhistorical, non-war game that would have probably made GMT have more troubles in the future because they tarnish their own reputation, right? Issues of censorship, all of that kind of crap, it doesn't matter. It's what the publisher wants to do. They made a decision, and it looks like they have made the right one, at least going forward. Maybe we'll find out more information down the road, but at this point, my internet cut out for a second. Thanks, internet service provider. It doesn't seem like we lost anything of great value. So I don't know. As a post-mortem, right? I think the lesson to take away in regards to all of this stuff is, think rationally when this kind of crap comes up in our hobby, right? It's just one of those things, like, how much did people care and why did they care? And it became, again, leveraged to bring people to an emotional place, to fight a culture war that doesn't have much to do with the hobby. And again, based on decisions of the target audience of the game, kind kind of shot it down, right? So, for a company that has a large production schedule, but at the same time, one that is so constrained, it makes sense to focus your throughput on the things that will sell well, look good for the company, and be on mark with the market that you're trying to address. So, I mean, at this point, this stuff's all going to be in the past. All of this crap regarding Scramble with Africa for Africa is going to be hopefully in the past, and hopefully I'm not performing necromancy and resurrecting the discussion. But again, a post-mortem I think is important when these weird discussions come up, because we have to reflect on it, right? Like, I feel like it's important, right? Be rational and reflect upon what's happened, and that way, if this ends up occurring in the future, if something like this occurs in the future, we take the time to say, well, what's really important? What's does this mean the end of gaming? No. Is this a slippery slope? Probably not. Every situation is unique. Every situation is going to have its own particular attributes that will weigh upon the decision of a publisher or a consumer or even a designer. And we have to we have to be adults. Come on, we're not kids. We can work through this stuff. Okay, well, that's it. That's all I wanted to address. I'm going to get back to recording the Dark Valley. We'll have another video up here for Turn 5 very shortly, I hope, today. I need to record some, and then I got some yard work to do, so hey, fun times. Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for watching. We'll get back to actual gaming here. See ya.